Welcome back to another edition of Maryland Family Matters. My guest today is Dr. Matt Spalding, who is a Washington scholar, college professor, and author of the new book, The Making of the American Mind, the Story of Our Declaration of Independence. Matt, thank you so much for walking us through really the theological underpinning of the Declaration of Independence. What a wonderful lesson of the five explicit and maybe one implicit reference to God in the Declaration. And we were just talking about how, in our modern understanding of this, many of us have not been taught these things. And
Right.
so I want to talk to you a little bit about education, because you mentioned the founders' understanding of the role that education plays in teaching the next generation these truths. So talk a little bit about that. What was their understanding of education, and specifically how we can teach patriotism, a love of country, to the next generation?
The um, the one thing that's kind of an overriding thing that becomes clear when we study the think of the founders on education is they think about it actually quite differently than we think about it today.
Hmm.
We didn't have a very kind of professionalized view of education, a very formalized view,
Yeah.
and we oftentimes, to our discredit, think about it a little too academically, if you will.
Hmm.
And I say that as a college professor, guilty of this myself.
Yeah.
But when you really kind of see how they looked at it, it's quite different. A striking phrase which James Wilson uses, but you see it's used several other places too. So it was kind of a popular phrase at the time. Originates with Cicero.
Hmm.
Is Wilson refers to the family as the seminary of the republic.
Hmm.
And I always thought that was just a powerful phrase, as somehow it's a recognition that the citizen uh, is formed, especially in childhood, and that
Hmm.
is extremely important.
Hmm.
Um, and the roots of their educational system really grew out of the relationship between parent and child, and the family relationship, community, extended family,
Yep.
things like that. And they understood education growing out of that, but continuing that formation, and
Hmm.
that's crucial, as we say think of education usually more as transferring knowledge, whereas the founders understood that was important. Right, you should teach them history and
Yeah.
geography and all the basic sciences, math. That's
The
all
fact.
important.
Hmm.
But in a republic, a free country in which these were going to be self-governing citizens, there was this additional public educational mission, which was to form them to be deliberate and thoughtful, to have the kind of character to be a self-governing citizen, which meant governing their self or governing their passions,
Hmm.
but also this question of patriotism,
Hmm.
which has got a kind of a bad reputation nowadays.
Yes.
Uh,
And you make reference to that a little bit. You talk about how it's misunderstood as unthinking allegiance to chauvinistic urges.
Yeah, it's just
Oh,
seen as it's a passion. So it's just, my country right or wrong, and there's
yeah.
nothing to it. Whereas that's not the case. They took this question very seriously.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a form of love. And forming one's character includes the correct formation of one's loves.
Hmm.
It's a particular type. There are other loves which are really more important ultimately, I suppose. But patriotism, rightly understood, is a correct love about one's country.
Yeah.
But that begs the question: what is it about one's country that is worth loving? That's
Hmm.
worthy of your affection?
Hmm.
And so there, they emphasized at what we might call a reflective patriotism, not a
Hmm.
knee-jerk patriotism, not a
Hmm.
the one that's often criticized, but a deep sense of what your country has accomplished, why it is good,
Hmm.
despite the fact that it's imperfect, as human beings are imperfect. What's about it? It's not merely in a republic. It's not merely the place. It's not merely the tribe. It's not merely who your ancestors were, which is the norm in most countries. But in a
Hmm.
republic, especially in America, which operates differently, it has something to do with these declared principles and whether we live up to them.
Yeah.
And so it changes it, which is say to be patriotic in America It's not merely to be loyal to one's homeland.
Mhm.
Oh, that's an important point, especially when we're young, and that instinctive patriotism is important. But in a free country, there has to be this reflective sense that we reflect about what it means to be free, what it
Mhm.
means to have liberty, what are the responsibilities of liberty, what are our obligations to our fellow citizens, and how does one responsibly use that freedom? How do we think about freedom in the world? All of these things. Well, that's a reflective kind of patriotism. So you teach patriotism then to kind of wrap up a longer, too long of an
Yeah.
answer here,
Yeah.
by forming it when students are young in the family and communities. They learn about their grandparents, what they did, perhaps in a war or an uncle, but then it moves outward to things people they don't know, and there you have to like reflect about and teach them history and ideas, and they've got to know something, as Augustine says, in order to love it. Which again comes back to why I think the crucial thing to know is the Declaration, because that's the greatest statement of our principles and our aspirations.
So
Um,
let me just eh, pull out this quote that you have in the book as a means of talking about educating the next generation, and then bringing the conversation to today. You mentioned Daniel Webster in the beginning of the book, and his vision. You said that he said that from a very young age, every American child should, quote, rehearse the history of his country. He should lisp the praise of liberty and those illustrious heroes and statesmen who have wrought a revolution in her favor. What
yes,
wonderful language
yeah,
that
Noah Webster,
sorry, no, not, sorry, no Webster.
the great
Um,
educational writer. No,
yeah,
that's a great. There's a famous passage from Lincoln where he talks about every mother should lisp this to her child.
yes. So
That's
my,
where he
my
gets in.
question, my question for you, Dr. Spalding, is that being taught to American children today writ large?
No, but also yes, which say that the public schools I think have largely failed this quest, if you will,
Yeah, yeah.
and much of higher education, in the our academic world is pushing against it and criticizing it, so it's making it even harder. So yeah, no, but on the other hand, I think sometimes we overly we see things as being too dark and and
Yeah,
problematic, if you will. Um, which is why I think we should take advantage of this anniversary, for instance, and remind
yeah.
people of this wonderful history. Which is to say that we think about things overly academically, we think about things over technically.
Mhm.
Um, it's important. What are children being taught by their parents?
Hmm.
Uh, it's important what kind of model we present to our nieces and nephews. It's important how we act in front of our neighbors.
Yeah.
Those kind of things is from Noah Webster's point of view and the founder's point of view. I think that's the beginning of patriotism.
Mhm.
When a parade goes by and they have the flag, well, do you stand up?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
take a knee? Right?
Mhm.
Those are important aspects of that. And there, I think that there's lots of signs that the country is divided. We debate these things, but there's also plenty of signs that it's quite healthy.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of people think this is still a good country. And then there are also signs even in education, especially in K through 12 education. The tectonic
Mm,
plates are moving, right? Classical
mm,
education, homeschooling, all of these things. Um, so I don't think by any means this is a lost debate. What I tend to find is that a lot of students have just not heard the argument. They've not
mm.
heard the stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And patriotism begins with stories, in my opinion. Um, which again points to why I wrote this book. It's a story about the Declaration,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a story about the men who wrote the Declaration. Um, and that's important beginnings of how to rebuild all of this stuff. And I'm very convinced there's a lot of people out there who want to hear this. They're tired of just hearing the negative side. And
Yeah.
granted, I think we should teach history warts and all. I don't want to hide things or whitewash things, but they also want to hear how they overcame those things, what they
Yeah.
accomplished, because it
Yeah.
seems that there's a great history there. I'd sure like to hear it for a change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's an opening, I think. That's an
That's great.
invitation.
You talked about families, what families could do, how parents need to teach this to their children, what schools need to do. Have you talked about or thought about what churches, the role that the church should play in reminding its congregants about the importance of the
Uh,
Declaration?
well, I have some, but that's a very fruitful and avenue, and it's great you brought it up.
Yeah.
Let me preface it by saying this, which might come as a surprise if people.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the things others have pointed this out, but I emphasize this in my book and discovered more even so when I did this research. The number one pamphlet in or the series of pamphlets that were throughout the whole revolution, the largest body of pamphlets were sermons. The
Hmm.
sermon in 1776 and years before and after was extremely influential.
Hmm.
Indeed, John Adams talks about the American Revolution actually having occurred. The real revolution was actually before the actual war, and central to that were the sermons.
Yes.
Yes, I think the problem is that too many pastors think of these things as completely separated. We think today that reason and revelation are against each other; they're at odds,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so we have to keep them separated.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And we can't talk about politics in the pulpit. Okay,
Yep.
it's as a partisan matter, I okay, fine. As a election, taking sides in election, okay, that's a separate question. But this is not that.
Hmm.
If you're talking about the kind of the moral underpinnings of how we understand man, how we understand human nature, how we understand these questions, it is primarily, first and foremost, it's a great topic, and it's perfectly appropriate for churches to get involved in teaching that, if for no other reason that the argument of the Declaration is ultimately the argument why those churches have and can exercise their religious liberty, because there are these fundamental rights that the churches can contribute to how we understand them, being created and endowed by God. Uh, but they should do a lot more, and I can do a lot more to defend them and explain them and teach them directly through their works.
Well, and it just strikes me, Dr. Spalding, that if you are a pastor and you're preaching on Genesis 1, which I mean, you could preach a year of sermons on Genesis 1,
Right.
and you're looking for an illustration of how to apply the fact that God has created human beings or He has endowed them with these things. You could do a lot worse than citing the Declaration of
Right.
Independence
Right.
and our founders' understanding of these things, because most of your congregants will be American citizens. And what a great way to remind them of both the theological truth from Genesis 1, but also an American history truth from their own
Absolutely.
declaration. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about another point that you make in the book. You say that the Declaration is the central idea of America. I forget if that was Lincoln's phrase or if that was your
Yeah,
phrase.
that was Lincoln. Lincoln said that there's always a central idea from which everything else emanates.
I-
And in America, the Declaration is that central idea.
Is that still America's central idea today in 2025, in your view?
Good question. Here's how I would answer it, because uh, the 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 surface answer, I suppose, is, well, of course it's not. We don't everything does not revolve around the Declaration.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, everything does. And if you think about now, we debate these things. It's controversial, and we debate about these things. But even when you think about the debate about slavery,
Yeah.
one of the prominent debates of our times about America, the presence and continued presence of slavery. What is that? It's actually about the Declaration. Are
Hmm.
the truths of the Declaration true? Do we live up to them?
Yes.
Um, right? You think about all the major political figures of our lives in a
Sure.
recent history: Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, um, right? They all talk about the Declaration of Independence, the Civil
Mm.
Rights Movement, Martin Luther King, the Civil War, Lincoln himself, Frederick Douglass, always wanting to go back to the Declaration. There is something about America, which I think which is still true, that our politics always have to go back to what does the founding mean.
Yeah.
You see it today between if you think of the MAGA,
Mhm.
the movement,
Yep.
the Tea Party movement of 20
Yep.
or so years ago. But if also you think about the debates of postmodernism in the left, the progressive left, they're debates about America, and
Yep.
ultimately the debates of America is what's the status and meaning of the Declaration. So it's still there. It's disputed. It's not as clear, I suppose, but our politics, our political debate ultimately still turns on those questions. And I think still in the hearts and minds of the American people, which means, again, I think there's this great invitation, given
Mm.
this anniversary, to okay, well, let's talk about that. What do these ideas actually mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there you've got
And
an
and
open.
even on the I loved how you said even on the progressive left, there is an appeal to the ideals, some of the ideals, albeit I would argue a misunderstood appeal. But even the emphasis for non-discrimination, all these kinds of things based on certain characteristics, appealing to that has as its underlying understanding that all men are created equal and all people should have equal justice under the law. These kinds of
Oh, that's
this
right. And so,
yeah,
and then as you move up your scale, if you will, right? That means so. What should we be teaching our youngest citizens? We should
yes.
be teaching that America is this great nation, and it's grounded in these principles. And the
Yeah.
Declaration of the Board in July 4th should be celebrated. Okay.
Yeah.
But then as you get older, what are you starting to do? You're starting to reflect more. What exactly does that mean? Where does it come from? What's the history of those ideas?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there'll be more dispute, and we'll engage in that, and that's what we do. But I would argue that the wealth of history, the wealth of academic scholarship, the consensus argument uh, is that the kind of the mainstream view is that the Declaration is central to what America means, and that American history, especially if you think of that, you know, the founding through the Great Civil War over slavery, really is defined by carrying out and aspiring to the principles of the Declaration. I mean, the whole civil rights movement
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
about the meaning of the Declaration of Independence. We fought a Cold War because we objected to communism. Why? Because we think that undermined the principles of self-government based on the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it's impossible to avoid the debate we're in today, which is kind of the postmodern, 1619.
Yeah.
Uh, that's kind of a blip in many ways. It's
Mm.
I grant that it's a debate, but it's more of a current debate.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, but when we really get back into the history, yes, there's some, but there's a great agreement between what we would call a general conservative, wanting to conserve America, and what we'd call an old liberal,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
They were all pro declaration. They
Yes.
might disagree
Yeah.
on policy matters today, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, they understood the Declaration was the heart of the matter. And that should be at the center of what we teach when it comes to, say, civic education and in our history classes.
The book is The Making of the American Mind, the story of our Declaration of Independence by Dr. Matthew Spalding. Dr. Spalding, thank you so much for your writing of this book, for your really your lifelong mission to teach the next generation our founding principles in Washington and far beyond. We're so grateful for your ministry. We'll use that term ministry for the next generation. And thank you for writing this book.
No, and thank you for having me, Jeff, and all of your work and the great work in Maryland, which of course, plays an important role in American history and the Declaration itself. And I would just encourage you and everyone else that you touch. Uh, I think what we can understand this as a ministry, we can understand it as a vocation, if you will. But
Yep.
I think we need to call our country back to these principles, and
Amen.
I've tried to do that a bit, and I call on everybody else to help me do more of that. So, thank you.